It started innocently enough. I had rented out my log cabin in the Black Hills of South Dakota to a couple seeking a peaceful getaway. The listing had attracted Marco and Nadia, who seemed pleasant and polite during our brief exchange online. But things changed when I decided to return to the cabin early, cutting short my business trip. It was an impulse decision, really. Something about my little sanctuary had been calling me back. As I pulled up the gravel driveway, the woods felt heavier than I remembered. The towering pines seemed to lean closer, their needles whispering secrets I couldn't quite hear. The air was damp, laced with a faint tang of metal. I shrugged it off as fatigue from the long drive and hauled my overnight bag inside. The cabin was silent. Too silent. Normally, the place exuded a kind of rustic charm, the faint creak of wood and distant rustled leaves creating a soothing background symphony. But now it felt off. "Hello," I called, my voice echoing faintly. No answer. I'd let Marco and Nadia know I'd be coming by, so I assumed they'd already left. Still, unease prickled at the back of my neck. I made my way to the kitchen, pausing when I noticed faint scuff marks on the floor, jagged, as if something heavy had been dragged. Shaking my head, I dismissed it as wear and tear. After all, the cabin wasn't new. Exhaustion won over curiosity, and I headed to my room. The bed looked more inviting than ever, and within minutes, I was fast asleep. A noise woke me in the middle of the night. A low, rhythmic humming. At first, I thought it was the wind, but it was too deliberate, too melodic. My heart pounded as I sat up, straining to listen. The sound seemed to be coming from just outside my door. Then came a faint scratching, soft, insistent, like fingernails against wood. My pulse quickened. I fumbled for my phone, pulling up the security app linked to the cabin's cameras. The footage showed Marco and Nadia arriving 2 days ago, laughing and unloading their car. But there was nothing after that. The rest of the feed was blank, as if the cameras had stopped recording. The humming grew louder. Against my better judgment, I decided to investigate. The hallway was dark, the air colder than it should have been. As I stepped into the living room, a chill ran down my spine. Symbols were carved into the wooden floor, their jagged lines glowing faintly in the moonlight. I didn't recognize the shapes, but they felt wrong, like they didn't belong in this world. My gaze was drawn upward to the attic door. It had always been nailed shut. Now it hung open, its hinges groaning softly in the stillness. "Marco? Nadia?" My voice was barely a whisper. The cabin responded with silence. A sudden thud from the attic made me jump. My grip tightened on the flashlight I grabbed from the kitchen. Taking a deep breath, I climbed the creaking ladder, each step feeling like an eternity. The attic was empty, save for a single candle flickering in the corner. Its weak flame cast long, jittery shadows that seemed to move on their own. Then I saw it. A crude, hastily drawn circle in the center of the attic floor, surrounded by more symbols. A sickly sweet smell hung in the air, making my stomach churn. As I backed away, I heard a low growl. Not an animal's growl, but something deeper, more guttural. I fled down the ladder, slamming the attic door shut behind me. Back in my room, I locked the door and leaned against it, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I heard it. Heavy breathing on the other side. Slow and deliberate, as if someone was standing there, waiting. I grabbed the fireplace poker I brought in earlier for peace of mind. My hands shook as I tightened my grip. The door swung open with a force that knocked me backward. Nadia stood there, her eyes black as coal, her lips moving rapidly in an indecipherable chant. Her voice was layered, as if a dozen people were speaking through her at once. The symbols on the floor began to glow brighter, pulsing in time with her words. "Get away from me." I screamed, brandishing the poker. She didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head, a slow, unnatural motion that made my skin crawl. I stumbled past her, running blindly into the forest. Branches scratched at my face and arms, but I didn't stop. My only thought was to get as far away from the cabin as possible. I don't know how long I ran before I collapsed, trembling at the edge of a clearing. Pulling out my phone, I dialed 911. My words tumbled out in a frantic mess as I tried to explain what had happened. The dispatcher assured me help was on the way, but the woods seemed to close in around me, their shadows deeper and darker than before. By the time the police arrived, the sun was rising. I led them back to the cabin, dread pooling in my stomach. But when we stepped inside, everything was normal. The symbols were gone, the attic door was nailed shut, and there was no sign of Marco or Nadia. The officers exchanged skeptical glances, their polite but disbelieving expressions making my blood boil. "I swear they were here," I insisted, my voice cracking. But there was no evidence to back me up. The cabin's cameras had recorded nothing after Marco and Nadia's arrival. The officers left, advising me to take a break and rest. I sold the cabin a week later. I couldn't bear to stay there, not with the memories of that night lurking in every shadow. But the locals still talk about it. Hikers report hearing ghostly chanting in the woods at night, and some claim to see flickering lights in the cabin's windows, though it's been abandoned for years. I try to tell myself it's over, that whatever happened was a bad dream or a trick of the mind. But sometimes, late at night, I hear the faint hum of that chant and feel the weight of unseen eyes watching me from the dark. And I know, deep down, that the cabin story isn't finished. Not yet. The first time I saw the chapel of St. Trine, it was draped in twilight, like a funeral shroud. Its towering spire leaned as if bowing to unseen forces, and the shattered stained glass windows glinted like jagged teeth in the fading light. I had read of its history, a sanctuary that had long since succumbed to decay and legend. Tales of the hunger, a dark spirit said to dwell within, were whispered in the nearby town of Blackwater, Maine. But such warnings only fueled my curiosity. I was a historian. After all, if there was truth buried beneath the lore, I would unearth it. The locals were less enthusiastic about my interest. The innkeeper, a wiry man with sunken cheeks, seemed reluctant even to rent me a room once he learned my purpose. "Nothing good comes from digging up the past," he muttered, handing me the brass key to room 3. His words lingered in my mind as I set my satchel on the creaky bed and gazed out the window toward the dark silhouette of the chapel. Nothing good, indeed. I ventured to the chapel at twilight, armed with a flashlight and journal. The air inside was stifling, heavy with the scent of damp wood and mildew. Deep scratches marred the pews, as though something monstrous had clawed through them in a frenzy. The altar was covered in remnants of black wax candles, their shapes distorted as if melted by unnatural heat. It felt as though the walls themselves were watching me, closing in with each passing second. In a corner, half hidden beneath debris, I found a leather-bound book. Its cover was cracked with age, and strange inscriptions wound across its surface like creeping vines. I hesitated for only a moment before slipping it into my satchel. The rational part of me screamed to leave it behind, but my greed for discovery drowned out all caution. This book, I was certain, would hold the secrets of St. Trine, secrets that could make my name in academic circles. Returning to my room, I placed a grimoire on the desk and examined its pages. The text was written in a language I didn't recognize, its symbols almost alive in their intricate designs. Diagrams of human figures surrounded by shadowy tendrils filled the margins. As I flipped through, a chill crept into the room, and the small lamp beside me flickered. The air felt electric, humming with a presence I couldn't see. At midnight, a sudden wind rattled the windows, and I froze. The draft had no source. The windows were shut tight. Then came the creaking sound, slow, deliberate, from behind the locked door. My breath caught as I turned to face it. The doorknob twisted, though I had bolted it from the inside. The lock clicked open with a soft, dreadful finality. Standing there was a figure that defied logic. He was gaunt, his frame impossibly thin, and his eyes were hollow pits of darkness. He pointed a skeletal finger at me and rasped, "Return what you stole." His voice was like the scrape of rusted metal, cutting through the air and my sanity. Panic overtook me. I grabbed the grimoire and hurled it at him, the book striking his chest before thudding to the floor. But he didn't flinch. Instead, he vanished, not in a puff of smoke, but as though he had never been there. The room fell silent, save for my pounding heart. The next morning brought no solace. I avoided my reflection at first, shaken by the night's events. But when I finally dared look into the mirror, my blood ran cold. The face staring back at me was mine, but it moved independently, smiling when I did not. Its eyes were too bright, too knowing, and it seemed to peer through me rather than at me. I smashed the mirror in a frenzy, shards scattering across the floor. By nightfall, an inexplicable force compelled me back to the chapel. It wasn't a tug or a pull, but a deep, visceral need, as though my very soul had been tethered to that cursed place. The walk felt endless, my steps heavy and reluctant, yet unstoppable. When I crossed the threshold, the air grew colder, and shadows stretched unnaturally long in the dim moonlight. The grimoire lay open on the altar, its pages fluttering despite the stillness of the air. Whispers rose around me, their source unseen. The same gaunt figure emerged from the darkness, joined by others. Figures half-formed, their bodies shifting like smoke caught in a breeze. They encircled me, their hollow eyes gleaming with hunger. I tried to scream, but no sound came. The shadows reached out, enveloping me in their cold embrace. My body felt like it was dissolving, piece by piece, as the ritual began. They forced me to kneel before the altar, their chant rising in a crescendo that vibrated through my very bones. In that moment, I understood. This was a shadow feast, an eternal ritual to sate the hunger. It consumed more than flesh. It devoured the essence of a person, leaving behind only an empty shell. I had become both participant and offering, trapped in a cycle with no end. Now, as I write these words, I am no longer sure if I am alive or dead. My reflection watches me from the cracked shards of the mirror, its grin mocking my despair. The shadows whisper my name, promising release that will never come. To whoever finds this account, heed my warning. Some discoveries are better left buried. And if you ever find yourself near the chapel of St. Trine, do not enter. For once the hunger marks you, there is no escape.